The use of remote-controlled vehicles in war often feels like a relatively new phenomenon, with today's emphasis on drones and ROVs. But during World War II, the Germans used several remote-controlled battlefield vehicles in order to launch attacks on fixed fortifications and the like. They were a development of an older, less successful vehicle invented by the French in World War I, the Schneider land torpedo Crocodile. Real tanks crewed by soldiers proved more useful than this early remote-controlled tank, but the fundamental concept was sound. In the interwar period, American and French inventors worked on improved designs for a tracked, remotely controlled demolition tank, and in 1940 the French prototype, built by Adolphe Kegresse, was captured by the Germans and sent to the Borgward company in Bremen for examination. The French prototype had actually been thrown into the River Seine in Paris in an attempt to keep it out of German hands, but the Germans recovered it nonetheless. Borgward was a car manufacturer and worked to create 2 German demolition vehicles for the army during World War II. The Soviets produced a series of radio-controlled tanks in the 1930s and 40s, designed to decrease the risks to soldiers. Known as tele-tanks, they actually saw combat in the Winter War against Finland. The tanks were radio-controlled versions of the standard T-18, 26 and 38, and the BT-5 and 7. The Germans had already realized that a remote-controlled demolition tank would be enormously useful in taking out strong enemy fortifications, without the risky, huge casualties amongst ordinary soldiers. During the invasion of France in 1940, German army engineers had used modified Panzer I tanks for the task, placing explosive charges next to bunkers or destroying minefields. The 10 modified Panzer Is performed well and would drop their charges off before returning to German lines for re-employment. What the Germans really wanted was a dedicated remote-controlled demolition tank, rather than a real tank which had been modified for the task. From the older French design emerged the Sdkfz 302 Goliath, a miniature tank which could carry a 60 kilo or 130 pound explosive charge. The Goliath was very small, making it a difficult target to hit. It was only 1.5 meters long and half a meter tall. It weighed 370 kilograms or 820 pounds. Around the same time, the British designed and built an experimental remote-controlled tank similar in concept to the Goliath. The mobile landmine was created by Metropolitan Vickers in 1940, a wire-guided vehicle. But after trials in 1941, the British Army rejected it as too slow and underpowered. The German Goliath was lightly armoured with 5 mm of protection, good against small arms and shrapnel, though the tracks were fully exposed. It was operated by a single soldier using a handheld remote control device. Signals were sent to the Goliath via a 650-metre or just over 2,000-foot cable that paid out the rear of the little tank. There were 3 strands to the cable, one to move the Goliath, one for steering, and one to detonate the charge, the Goliath being a single-use vehicle to be expended during the attack. The vehicle's 2 electric motors gave the Goliath a maximum speed of 6 km an hour, or 3.7 miles per hour, though later versions used a cheaper petrol engine. The change to a 2-cylinder petrol engine manufactured by Zundapp improved the weapon's range to 7 miles. In 1944, a bigger version of the Goliath was manufactured with an increased explosive payload. The switching from a battery-powered electric motor to a noisy petrol engine meant that the Allies could also now hear the Goliath as it tried to sneak up on a target, further aiding its destruction. This ingenious little vehicle saw plenty of combat. One of the extensive uses of the Goliath was during the Battle of Anzio in Italy in April 1944, an Allied amphibious operation to outflank very solid German defences on the Italian peninsula with an aim of capturing Rome. Germans managed initially to contain the Allied beachhead, subjecting it to considerable pressure. During a German counterattack against the Anzio beachhead, 13 Goliaths were sent forward to destroy Allied strongpoints to create a breach in the line. But Allied artillery fire destroyed 3 of the Goliaths before they could get close, and the remaining 10 were withdrawn by their operators as they were too vulnerable to Allied heavy weapons. During the D-Day landings in Normandy in June 1944, some Goliaths were captured by the British and Americans, again after artillery fire had severed their control cables.
Demonstration of the Nazi midget demolition tank captured both in Italy and in France. Loaded with explosives, the tiny tank can be sent against selected targets by radio control. This device appears to be expendable. A larger type can be retrieved by radio after discharging its load of explosives. Troops in this area call it the doodlebug, and here one of the GIs goes for a ride.
Goliaths were used by the SS during the crushing of the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, when the Polish Home Army rose up against the Germans occupying Poland's capital. The Germans ruthlessly crushed all opposition, destroying vast stretches of the city and killing tens of thousands of civilians. The Goliaths were used to destroy Polish bunkers and fortified buildings. But many had their cables cut by brave resistors before reaching their targets, the long, thin cables being very vulnerable to attack. Though Borgward produced 7,564 Goliaths, most failed to successfully attack well-defended enemy strongpoints, the weaknesses in the design being the aforementioned trailing control cable and the Goliath's very thin armour. But the design concept certainly worked and could be improved upon, and the Goliath is generally acknowledged to have helped lay the foundation for modern remote-controlled military vehicles. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.